Awesome. Thank you. So, listening to you on the ABC, you were talking about the lack of proactive action that is being done by the AFL when it comes to inclusive behaviours. We've seen Alistair Clarkson have a homophobic slur, no education done after the fact. Do you think there is a lack of LGBTQ plus representation in the AFL in terms of board members, CEOs who don't even know how to approach the issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think the lack of representation amongst the AFL leadership definitely doesn't help. But you don't have to be a member of the LGBTQ community to be a good ally. And we have seen good allies in some levels of leadership, such as the St Kilda Football Club, the Sydney Football Club, who at the CEO, at the chair level, have really invested in uh, proactive inclusion initiatives. And that includes, that might culminate in something like a pride game, but it involves a whole lot of work behind the scenes leading up to that, including engagement with various stakeholders, with players, with fans, with, staff, educating them, inviting people in to come and share their stories, hearing from members of the community as to what their experiences have been like in sport, and working with them to create solutions for how we can make it, a more inclusive environment. So yes, I think the lack of representation at the senior leadership level of the AFL doesn't help, but it's not the only problem.
Yeah, for sure. No, I completely understand that. And with players using the slurs, once again, you've probably answered this a few times, but did you want a zero tolerance policy? Are you happy with, willpower 5 weeks? Is the number just arbitrary? What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think the sanctions have been acceptable from my perspective. I think that you want to see, definitely with all sanctions, you want to see consistency. But what I'm interested in is consistency across whether it's homophobia or racism, for example. Both are equally damaging. Both exclude people from the game, and we need to see a similar approach to both. I think that the impact that the language has is the most important thing to focus on. And we know that LGBTQ people experience much higher rates of depression and even attempted suicide. And part of that comes down to the discrimination and the abuse that they receive in society. That includes casual homophobia or incidental homophobia or accidental homophobia. And so these need to be challenged in order to create a safe and welcoming environment for LGBTQ players and fans and the whole community.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting to me because it almost seems like they're able to sort of compartmentalize that, oh, this is just a word that I'm using to slur my opponent. And they almost forget there's kids watching and like the damage that that can do. Yeah, I'd imagine would be awful.
Yeah, I mean, AFL players, AFL coaches, whether they like it or not, they're leaders in society. A lot of people look up to them, and so what they say has an impact, and what they say matters. And I can only draw on my own experiences when I was a young kid, struggling to come to terms with my sexuality, especially in the world of football. Hearing my teammates, hearing the opposition, hearing my coach use this language. If I had, heard this, picked up on a broadcast on television, watching my heroes play the game, it had a shattering impact on my sense of self worth. To think that these people thought, I internalized that language, and it could be as simple as using the word gay to mean bad or weak or stupid, or some of the more offensive homophobic slurs that we've seen in football in recent weeks. It has a really damaging impact on not just kids, like adults too. It cuts deep. Some of these words that have been used, I remember them being written about me on the back of a toilet door in high school. Like these, it carries a lot of baggage for the LGBTQI community, and people should listen to the LGBTQI community when we say that this language is harmful and that it's not acceptable.
Yes, 100%. And I was definitely guilty in my younger days of using that exact slur and quite ashamed and embarrassed that I did use that so openly. But there's also, obviously, you mentioned St Kilda, Sydney, the Pride game. I went to a Pride game on the weekend for the women's VAFA, and that was amazing to hear And I think, like you said, like not to be tokenistic, that we actually got to hear stories and
Mm.
understand what people were going through. Are you surprised there's no Pride round in the men's game yet?
Um, I mean, I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised. I mean,
Mhm.
what you touched on before is really important in that a lot of the language that people use, you might not intend to cause harm, and the reality is that a lot of it is learned behavior from a very young age. Most footballers have grown up in an environment where this was tolerated, and I think while individuals have to be held accountable for their own actions, it's also to acknowledge that sanctions alone are not going to change a culture, and just picking up an individual player when they use a word, is not going to change a culture. This is something that starts at the grassroots. It starts at a very young age and it permeates all the way through to the elite. And the AFL could and should be doing more at all levels of sport to send a strong message that this language is unacceptable. And I remember after I came out, I had a lot of my teammates apologize to me for language that they may have used. They hadn't even thought about it before. And, I'm very forgiving for people who, use that language and they may not know better. But at the end of the day, once you have the opportunity to hear stories and get educated, that's when you can take action on your own behavior and call out others as well. And yeah, it's been amazing to see Pride games and Pride rounds and Pride Cups at the grassroots level. I mean, at the end of the day, that's where the majority of people play sport and exist in sport. And so grassroots have really been leading the way on their own, off their own backs. I think at the AFL level, the fact that we have an AFLW competition with many openly gay players playing there, and we have a Pride round within
Mm.
AFLW, for me, it's a jarring kind of disconnect that we don't have that in the men's competition. Let alone the fact that there hasn't been a male player at the elite level who's ever felt comfortable enough to come out. Like that's the reason to be doing it, because clearly the culture isn't ready. Clearly, we need to have more conversations about it. And that's what a Pride round and a Pride game creates an opportunity for clubs to do. And we've seen that with St Kilda and Sydney with the Pride game, but every club deserves to go through that process and have that opportunity. And their LGBTQ fans deserve to be celebrated just as St Kilda and Sydney's do, in that game. So I understand that the AFL is wary of putting some, a small minority of fans offside who can be
Mm.
very vocal in their opposition to sort of anything. They're probably similarly vocal against the Indigenous round. They're probably similarly vocal against the existence of the AFLW. These are not the people who should be pandered to in the AFL. The AFL needs to be, appreciating that the future of football is inclusive.
Mm.
And we want people of all genders, all sexualities, all races, all cultures involved in the game. And that means, not only not being homophobic and not saying homophobic things, but
Mm.
being visible and proactive about what you stand for, what your values are. And that's what a Pride round does.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think, obviously different topic, but yeah, even with, it still angers me that how the whole Adam Good saga was dealt with. And yeah, you're so right, just about there just needs to be a bit of proactiveness and yeah, not react because it's too late by then. And
Yeah.
you mentioned about players coming out. Just lastly, do you have hope as someone you've done so much work in this space? Young Australian of the Year. You've obviously done really amazing things. Not to pump you up too much, but do you think this will it improve to a point where you think there'll be many AFL players coming out? Or is that too hard to say?
I hope so. I mean, I think that if I reflect on when and how we might see the first openly gay male player in the AFL, I suspect it may be more a future generation of someone who has grown up in a football culture that is more inclusive, has grown up and played junior footy at a time when there's a zero tolerance approach to homophobic slurs, so that they know where the AFL stands on this issue, that they're going to have their back as a code, as a culture, that they've played in Pride games, at a lower level, and so by the time they reach an AFL level, it's possible that they're already openly gay, as Michael Sam was when he was drafted into the NFL, or like Matthew Mitcham was before he won the gold medal in Beijing. I think anyone who has reached the level of 18 or 19, 20 and is still in the closet are probably struggling a lot with who they are and are doing a lot to repress that, to hide that. And the sad fact is that many people will do that their whole life, and they'll never sort of live their authentic selves. And that has been the case for every gay male player to date in the history of AFL. They've never felt comfortable to come out, even though many statistically would have had to exist. And so while I hope that I would love to see a player who is currently playing, or a past player, have the courage to declare that and to be open and comfortable and proud with who they are. I think the sad reality is that when you've grown up in a culture that you're constantly being shamed for who you are, or you constantly feel like people around you are going to judge you, you may end up doing that for the rest of your life. And so I think, the sad reality is that future generations hopefully won't have to go through that because of the work that we're doing now to try and change the culture. And that, our first openly gay player might be someone who is announced as the first openly gay player when they're drafted because they're already openly gay. And as I think change for me will come at a time when a player will come out, and it probably won't even be a news story because it's just part and parcel of the diversity of the game, as it is in every other part of life at the moment, except for sport.
Yeah. No, let's hope for that, because I think it would just make the game so much better, and hopefully it can happen. Mate, I'm all done. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And it was actually an honor to interview you. So
Thank you for the kind words, and
pleasure.
all the best with the rest of your studies.
Thank you so much. I'll email you the story as well, just to make sure you're all happy with it. And hopefully, just keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing really great work. So thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Tom. No worries.
Enjoy
Take
the rest
care.
of your day. Thanks.
Thanks, mate. Bye.